Community Forum is sponsored by the Easton Grange 196 and a friend of Yardley Wood Rink and the Easton Lions Club.
There's a storm across the valley, the clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. Today is January 26th, 2024. I'm Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host, and today I welcome back an old friend, someone who you've met before on my show, Ed Leonard. Actually, Ed, I think you were on Growing Up in Easton, my other show, right? Not on Community Forum.
Yeah, right.
So now you're on Community Forum, and you're going to talk a little bit about your latest endeavor, which is about Ted Williams. You've done a lot of research, and you're writing a book, which hopefully will come out sometime when? This year? Next year?
Who knows?
Who knows what year? But it will be able to enjoy all the fruits of your labors, which have been many. First of all, tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I moved to Easton, Northeastern, in 1940 and attended second grade. Came over from Brockton and lived on Columbus Avenue and enjoyed living in Easton. They had a lot to offer. And from there, I went to Northeastern University, graduated, and worked for the Foxborough Company for 32 years. Got interested in history, my family history, the history of Easton, Ames. I moved around quite a bit, lived in Maine, lived in New Hampshire, and currently I live in Lakeville, and that got me into what I want to talk about today. I was presented with this book called The Wingmen. It's a story of Ted Williams and John Glenn, and it says the unlikely, unusual, unbreakable friendship between John Glenn and Ted Williams. So in reading through that, I came across one sentence that said that Ted Williams made occasional cameo appearances at his baseball camp in Lakeville, Mass.
Mm.
And when I read that, I was thinking, I live in Lakeville. I've been there for 15 years at the time, and 18. And I'm saying he made more than a casual appearance. And I had recalled going to my barber, Fred Correa, who was a barber in Lakeville. And one day he told me that while he was giving Ted Williams a haircut, that Ted saw a fly casting rod leaning against the wall and asked Fred if he was a fisherman. Well, like most barbershops, there's all kinds of mementos kicking around. He had hunting and fishing stuff. And Fred said, yeah, I'm trying to teach myself to be a fly cast fisherman. Well, that kind of set Ted off because he's an expert fisherman fly casting. And when he got through with the haircut, he had Fred out in the parking lot giving him his first lesson in fly casting. So, and I remembered that, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And I was never a big fan of baseball, football, or sports. I used to work in Easton, many different jobs, caretaker of the library, worked at Ladd's Hardware, mowed a lot of lawns, shoveled a lot of driveways, but never paid any attention to baseball. But when living in Lakeville, you drive down Precinct Street, and here's this big sign that says Ted Williams Camp. And I can remember seeing that. I said, there's something wrong with that cameo appearance thing. So I started looking into it. And I have found out that Ted spent 10 years, 12 years of his life during the summer living in Lakeville, farming and running a baseball camp for boys. And I started looking into it, and I found out that it became a real legacy of Ted. He had the legacy of being a batter, a good hitter, slugger for the Red Sox. He had a legacy of being a wingman for John Glenn, because he fought during the Korean War, flying under the wing of John Glenn. But I found out that this was a legacy that Ted had for 10 years, and nobody had ever talked about it, and he didn't even talk about it. So what I'm in the process now is writing an article, and it turned out to be a small book about the overlooked legacy of Ted Williams, the Ted Williams Boys Baseball Camp in Lakeville from 1957 until 1986.
Okay, so we can see that. And this is going to be something that you're going to be able to read, all of us are going to be able to read sometime in the future, hopefully. Anyway, thanks. So what have you discovered?
Well, I started speaking to elder people that went to the Council of Aging in Lakeville, because the people that knew anything about it would still be in their 70s, maybe 80s, and still living. Mm-hmm. And without exception, I ran into people all the time that had a little vignette to tell about Ted, such as a fellow that was in high school in Middleborough and sold Ted Williams a color TV set in 1961. A fellow that actually went to the baseball camp, which ran for 8 weeks in the summer, divided into 4 two-week sessions. And he went for one of the 2-week sessions. And he actually played baseball at that camp under Ted's direction. And Ted offered he and his teammates a baseball bat. And he still had it in his closet. Then he went on, after he was a member of the camp, he went on to work at the camp in the dormitory, not the dormitory, in the commissary or the dining room that fed these kids. Well, it turned out, looking more and more into it, that what happened was a fellow by the name of Albert Cassidy, who was a local businessman, struggling, but an entrepreneur, and he found out that the Boston Council Boy Scouts owned a piece of property, a large tract of 180 acres in Lakeville, with a Boy Scout camp from 1920 until 1957. And it was up for sale, and he wanted to buy it and run a baseball camp. Ted wasn't even in the picture at this time. He went to the bank, and they wouldn't give him any money. They said, it's a stretch. You're not going to be successful. You have to have money, and you have to have a name. Well, at that time, Rocky Marciano in the town of Brockton, city of Brockton, had retired. And he went after Rocky because there were some ties between Rocky and Lakeville. And he finally acknowledged that he would sponsor it. Went back, Albert went back to the bank, and they still wouldn't give him a loan. They said, you can't have a boxer sponsoring a baseball camp. So then he put forth a little presentation, and he went to Fenway Park, and he hailed Ted down as he's walking from a dugout to the batting cage. And Ted went over, and he says, what do you want? He says, I want to buy this Boy Scout camp in Lakeville and start a baseball camp for boys. And Ted was interested, but he says, I'm busy now. I can't talk to you, but I'll call you later. Evidently, Albert gave him his phone number. At the end of that season, in 1957, Ted called him up and said, I want to come down and see the property. So he went down there, they looked at it, Ted says, okay, I'm in. They went back to the bank in Lakeville. They still wouldn't give him the loan. They still didn't think it would be successful. But Ted had a friend who was part owner of the cooperative bank in Middleborough, the next town over. And they immediately gave him the loan. And this is the beginning of this legacy, because Ted put up what would be the deposit of a $60,000 purchase price, probably $12,000. He put up the money for that, for the down payment. But he never had his name on the lease, on the mortgage. It went to Al Cassidy. And after that, they passed the papers with a handshake. Ted Williams said to Al, "Don't ever let me down, but I'm with you. We'll make this a go." So then Cassidy, with his brother, Bernie, and his brother-in-law, Les, started to put together the formation of a baseball camp. Now, the Boy Scouts had already 3 baseball diamonds on this property. There was a lake there, Loon Lake, where they had fishing and boating and the Boy Scouts thing, and they had a dormitory. They didn't have a dormitory. They had cabins, and they had a big dining room. They had an office, and a lot of open space for whatever Boy Scouts did. So anyway, the 3 of Ted's partners started to put together and form the baseball camp while Ted was still playing for the Red Sox. And Ted had a contract until 1960 when he retired from the Red Sox. So he's kind of overlooking what these guys are doing. In the meantime, they added 2 more diamonds, a major league diamond and a little league diamond. They added a dormitory that was 135 feet long and 135 feet wide, shower facilities, so that people from all over the students, campers from all over the country could come and live there for the summer. And they would pay $125 for 2 weeks, $250 for 4 weeks, or $490 for 8 weeks in the summer. But by the time Ted retired and came down, they were almost bankrupt because they had spent all of this money creating these facilities and taking a salary, because they had some income coming from these kids who signed up. So in the first year, in 1958, when they opened, Ted had to pick up and pay for a lot of the expenses that were coming with no income. But he never got any credit for any of this. And when he retired in 1960, he no longer had an income of $100,000 a year from the Red Sox. He signed up with Sears and Roebuck to become a sponsor of a sports advisory group. And he was responsible for Sears promoting baseball, fishing, and hunting equipment. And then he had others, Olympic champions, that were on the committee selling their ability for track and field and the other things. So they were paying him $100,000 a year for a 5-year contract. So now he had an income. Well, in the meantime, he divorced his first wife. He married Lee Howard. That only lasted 2 years, from 61 to 63, and he had another expense. But they didn't have enough money coming in to pay for all of their bills. So he continued to financially support this, and he lived in Lakeville for 10 years every summer.
And didn't he lead the workshops for the boys? Wasn't he the teacher?
He participated in coaching, but he had to, if you stop and think about having, the first year they had over 100 kids for the first year. In the middle of it, like in 65, they had almost 200 kids living there, and they had uniforms, they had equipment, they took their meals, they lived full-time, and they had to have coaching staff, they had to have medical facility, they had to pay for insurance, big liability. And this whole organizational thing took 3 guys all the time, 12 months of the year to run this thing, even though it was only active for 8 weeks. And when Ted showed up in 1960 after he retired from the Red Sox, he spent a lot of time and money making sure this thing became successful. And he did some coaching. He had a 3-wheel golf cart. He'd drive around.
But obviously, his name on the camp, Ted Williams Camp, was the draw for many, many young men, young boys.
Yes, well, his name on it was the draw, right?
Yeah. And tell me something. Did out of all of these young boys who came, did anyone go on to the majors?
Yes, yes. A few of them did. Hayward Sullivan was, I think, the general manager or something of the Red Sox. He sent his son to Ted's camp. He had a lot of names, and some of them went on to become major league ball players. I have the names of a few of them.
Yeah. Well, isn't that so? It really was a fruitful enterprise.
It was a legacy, and the definition of a legacy is a long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc., that took place in a person's life. Now, Ted had a legacy offering himself as a baseball player,
right,
or a slugger. He wasn't a very good ball player. He was a good slugger. That was a legacy. Then he went in and he became a Navy pilot during his last few years during World War II. He enlisted and he became a pilot. And then at the end of the war, he went back to playing baseball for the Red Sox.
It's so true that Ted Williams was a legacy, baseball legacy, fighter pilot during World War II, wingman for Glenn also, and now this is the third legacy that you're writing about. It's the Ted Williams baseball camp in Lakeville, Massachusetts.
Right.
So why is this so important to tell? Why is this story and this legacy important to tell?
Well, I look at it as a legacy as a player in baseball, which everybody knows Ted Williams. That's a legacy. But then when he fought in the Korean War with John Glenn, and the guy went so far as to write a book about it. That's
So it was the Korean War, not World War II?
Both.
Oh, both.
He was in the Navy air pilot, but he never saw action during World War II.
Okay.
He saw action flying over North Korea, dropping bombs and whatever. And he was a hero. And he became a lifelong friend with John Glenn because of that. So that's a legacy that he gave of himself to his country.
Right.
Gave himself in baseball, he gave himself to the country, but this effort that he put in for 10 years in Lakeville, the baseball camp, was giving himself to youngsters to build character. And he put his money and his time into it. And he never got any credit for it. And he never asked for any credit.
So your book is going to provide that credit.
That's what I'm looking forward to, is to document the fact that he gave of himself for the good of others, especially youngsters.
Right. And at the same time produced major league players.
Well, a few of them became major, but the real effort was that when he first went into playing baseball, he didn't mingle with the people of prominence. He liked to deal with the everyday person, and he always liked kids. If you go to Fenway Park today or to the summer camp, there's a bronze statue of Ted Williams with a boy sitting next to him. That is who he was. He really cared about the youth, and he cared about people living honest, disciplined lives. When he ran the camp down there, he ran it with military discipline. He had the kids up at 7 in the morning, saluting the flag in the morning, singing the national anthem. If a kid needed a haircut, he told him he needed a haircut. I mean, he ran that with his own effort.
So he was General Williams.
Yes. And if you stop and think about it, back in 1960, 1965, if you paid $500 for your kid to spend the summer, you had to have money to do that. $500 then is like $50,000 today, you know. And a lot of people with money sent their kids to camp so they didn't have to nurture them at home. And this became an outlet for these kids, and he took responsibility for these kids, a lot of liability for it.
Now tell me, wasn't Ted Williams' own roots very modest?
Say again?
Didn't he come from very modest background?
He was always embarrassed about his youth. His mother was Mexican. He grew up in San Diego, and his mother was a soldier for the Salvation Army. She was never home, but she did provide for Ted and his younger brother Dennis.
So he didn't have a father growing up.
He had a father, but the father was henpecked. The mother was the dominant figure, and the father was mild-mannered, and he didn't come home very often because he was always getting badgered by his wife. So Ted was embarrassed about his whole family life. In fact, when they died, he paid for their funerals, but he only went there by himself. He never went with his wife or his kids when his family died.
Really?
He wouldn't even talk about his family background, but he was obsessed. And believe me, he was obsessed with hitting a object with a baseball bat. And it turned out to be a baseball. And he was recruited by the Padres when he was in high school, 17 years old, as a player, because he had good batting average.
Mm-hmm.
Then he was recruited and hired by the Red Sox in 1937, 38. And they gave a bonus to his mother, which he took. He never saw it, but it gave him an outlet. Then he hired on with the Red Sox and was a farm team up in Minnesota. And he became a hunter. He liked hunting, and he became a professional hunter. He met a girl that he ultimately married, but he always was thinking about hitting a baseball. When he was with the Red Sox, he studied pitches. He knew the character of every pitcher that he ever faced and what kind of a ball he threw and whatever. And he came up, when he joined the Navy Pilot Association, they tested his eyesight. And that was the first time they realized that he had unbelievably good eyesight. He could see a ball being thrown 35 feet away, the average male 20 feet. So he had that extra ability to see the ball coming to him, and he studied. He worked hard at it. He wouldn't go out at night. He'd go to his room. He'd practice swinging the bat. He'd watch TV. He didn't mingle with the players or the hierarchy. He got friendly with the guy sweeping the street or in the hotel, the everyday guy.
Right.
And he got to be a very strong supporter of the Jimmy Fund. Because of his kids. And he would go off and visit with kids at the hospital and travel miles away, and he never wanted that to be published. He just gave himself to kids. He loved that. But he never wanted any...
And the irony is that I don't think he had children, did he?
He had 3 children.
Oh, he did?
He had 1, Bobby Joe, with his first wife, and 2 with his third wife, John Henry and Claudia. And he loved them. But he didn't give them the nurturing that he wished he had when he was a kid. When he was with his brother, they'd wait up at 10 o'clock at night for his mother to come home and cook supper. I mean, he had no nurturing at all. He was supported. His mother sent him to a camp himself, bought him a fishing rod, bought him a rifle.
So he learned to cook himself.
I don't know that he cooked much.
Well, he certainly didn't want to wait till 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. And then when he was first with the Red Sox, he didn't date girls. He didn't mingle. He didn't go out and have parties or anything like that. He went to his room and practiced swinging the baseball bat.
So he was very disciplined.
Very, very
and
disciplined.
So that discipline he brought to the camp.
Yes, that's true.
And it was almost a military style that he had there.
Right.
And the children responded very well to that.
Right. He helped a lot of kids, over 1,000 kids.
Right.
1,500 kids.
So how far have you come with this manuscript?
Not very far.
My goodness,
This is it.
this is it. Okay, so you're just starting, but you've done the research.
I'm still doing it.
You're still doing the
It's
research.
active, right? I'm still
And-
meeting people that have a little story. And you take all of these little stories, it's a thread in a fabric. And now I've got,
Well, aren't the stories that those are the most interesting? People are going to want to read about those stories. People that knew him, and to give a light into his character and his, as you say, his dedication to youth.
yes.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's a legacy.
So you gotta work hard because people are dying. You gotta get those people.
Tell me about it.
I know
And
Ed
that's
will,
been part of my fun. I've had a lot of fun talking to people
Yeah.
because a lot of them are getting forgetful.
yeah.
Even though they can remember some things, they can't remember,
Well,
what their next meeting is.
sure. Well, now that's not true. That's not true of you, Ed. I mean, I know you're up there in age, and you'd never know it. Never know because your brain is working perfectly fine, and physically you're fine. So you're
Yeah.
really doing really well, and that gives us hope that this is a book you're going to finish.
Well, it'll
and-
be a booklet anyway. Maybe I can find somebody that can really write it.
Uh-huh.
It brings up another subject. I've been going to the creative writing group at the Council of Aging in Lakeville,
Oh,
and it's creative writing. And I went there with the idea that if you have nonfiction, a lot of facts,
hmm
you should be able to write it in a way that it's entertaining for people to read, even though it's
exactly.
factual.
hmm
And I went to the cafe they have every Friday morning, and the creative writing group, 5 of the members gave a short talk to the cafe people attending the coffee hour. And I happened to be there by accident, and I heard all of these stories told. And each and every one was very well presented. And I was impressed, and I said, I want to be able to do that. Then I went to the creative and met some of the guys in the meeting. And one fellow said what he spoke of was not his actual experience that he talked about, but it was all made up. It was all creative. And I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. I believed it. I'm saying, creative writing, that's actually I told him, I said, you should have to tell people that what you're going to tell them is not fact. It's creative.
It's fiction.
He says, well, that's up to them to find out.
Well,
now, today we're talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
People believe what they want to believe.
mm,
It doesn't have to be true.
yeah.
And that's,
Unfortunately.
yes.
Now, before I became a lawyer, I was a creative writing teacher.
Were you?
I don't know if you know that, Ed,
Well, I believe it.
but I got to tell you, creative writing teachers are now being replaced by A1 intelligence. You know, the
Artificial intelligence.
artificial intelligence, A1,
That's,
or AI, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
And in fact, my son, who's a film producer in Hollywood and also a screenwriter, he showed me a whole page that was written by artificial intelligence. All he did was put in some facts and a little plot, and all of a sudden, and it was beautifully written. Oh my God. I would have given it an A+. It was just, and I couldn't believe it. So you may not have to learn how to be creative and write well. You can always try out this artificial intelligence. Now, I don't know how you access it, but I can certainly
I'm
ask you.
so concerned about how bad that's going to become for the average
Yes, I understand. There
person.
are dangers, and
going to do more harm than good.
and people. Well, people are working on that. I mean, because
You're
it's
right,
recognized.
right,
Yes,
rightfully
yes,
so.
rightfully so. So you're having a good time. You're meeting people who remember Ted Williams, getting their stories, writing them down, and putting it all together. So, what's your next project?
I don't have one. This will take me the rest of my natural life, I think.
Do you think? Okay. Well, that's going to be a long time. We don't want to wait that long for this book. This
One of the
booklet.
threads was Ted when he was there, he never bought any property in Lakeville, but he lived there. So I'm trying to figure out, where did he live? And it turns out he befriended a gal by the name of Lydia Roach, very wealthy, single girl, but from a wealthy family, and they owned a lot of property, hundreds of acres in Lakeville. And she raised horses. She was a pilot. And Ted was married, but they became friendly with this Lydia Roach. And I've been to the properties that she had. She raised horses, and she named two of her horses Slugger and Home Run.
Well, you can tell.
So that's another thread in this fabric of this legacy.
Wonderful. So are you taking photos too? You're including photos?
I have all kinds of photos here. Mm-hmm. There's one you might want to see.
Mm-hmm. You're so organized, Ed.
Well, I'm trying to be. There's today the signs going into that property.
We're gonna put those up at the end of the show, as you can see, and then here's the camp also.
Yeah.
Pictures. Yeah. Okay. So we'll save that for putting
But
it up later. Yeah.
Loon Pond Lodge of Ted Williams Camp. Ted Williams Camp, a picture of the diamond.
So Ed Leonard, Oliver Ames graduate, 1952, and historian and reporter and a member of the Eastern Historical Society, big time member, long time member, and we certainly appreciate all you do. And you do it with purpose. And you talk about having fun.
Yeah.
But it's also a wonderful way to stimulate your mind, keep yourself mentally fit. And that's a lesson for all our viewers. Yeah. Start writing. Put down your thoughts.
Yeah, right.
And those of us seniors, you can write, or you can video tape, or you can audio tape your life story and your parents and your grandparents, and do that. Do that for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And I hope to do that in the studio, is to talk about my inheritance way back, where my roots came from, where they were.
Right.
And then all these little stories that I heard from my parents about their lives and so forth, because I want my great-grandchildren, who will never meet me because I won't be here, and I'd like to have them see me as a live person on tape. I won't be alive for them in reality, but I will be alive for them on tape. And so I suggest, Ed, that you might think about doing that. You have so much to tell, and our viewers, think about that as a wonderful legacy for your great-grandkids and future generations, because so much is lost when somebody passes. Yeah. And so many people I know say, oh, I wish I had sat down and talked to my grandparents about this and that. And all of that gets lost. We live our lives and time goes by. So start doing it. Either start writing like Ed, or start talking, do an audio tape or a videotape. Get one of your kids to videotape you. Very easy. And the rest is history. Literally. Thank you, Ed, for joining me today on Community Forum.
Well, thank you for having me.
And good luck in your writing.
Right.
Fascinating stories that you have to share with everybody. And we look forward to that book or booklet about Ted Williams in Lakeville, Massachusetts. Right. Thank you, viewers, for joining us today. And until next time, Priscilla Almquist-Olsen bidding you farewell, and hoping that you have enjoyed this program as much as Ed and I have enjoyed performing for you. Until next time, be well.
Community Forum is sponsored by the Easton Grange 196 and a friend of Yardley Wood Rink and the Easton Lions Club.